We are about to read this Shabbat, the longest parasha of the whole Torah, Parashat Naso, with 176 pesukim. Good luck to the Baal Koreh, but in the meantime for us, I would like, with Hashem's help today, to share with you something very interesting about a certain pattern that we have in this week's parasha. And as long as it is, there is one idea that keeps on coming back over and over throughout almost every single subject that the Torah covers in Parashat Naso. And it is the actual name of the parasha, Naso itself. In fact, we need to understand what is exactly happening in this week's parasha. But before we get there, I also have to remind you that Parashat Naso always happens to fall after Matan Torah. Chag HaShavuot always stands between Bamidbar and Naso. And I don't think that it's a coincidence. In fact, the word Naso, but per se, means to elevate. And we are definitely elevated. Once a Jew accepts the Torah upon himself, is truly mekabelet HaTorah, he becomes elevated. He becomes a Nasi. Just like Avraham Avinu was named by all his neighbors, Nesi Elohim Ata Betochenu. But I think that in Parashat Naso we have all the details, and if we connect all the dots, we can actually see how this happens. And look at the absolutely beautiful Torah, how in Hebrew the word Naso can have so many different meanings, and yet by connecting all the dots we see a very clear pattern. So with your permission, I would like to just cover the main topics of this week's parasha. The first one is Naso et rosh bnei Gershon gamhem. Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu to count the Leviim, and the word Naso, just like the word kitisa, many times means to count the Leviim. That's the first Naso in the parasha. The second time we're going to see the word Naso is when the Leviim, those that we count, will carry the Mishkan. Laset in Hebrew, Masa, also means to carry a burden. And that is the second time that we see the word Naso in the same parasha, Parashat Naso. Further, we talk about something very random. The Torah talks about v'hitvadu et avonam ve'et avon avotam. Which talks about the vidui, the confession. When someone did a sin, then he's supposed to confess his sin. And the truth is that when we talk about the kapara of that sin, in Parashat Kitisa, the pasuk, the very famous pasuk by Vaya'avor is Nose avon v'fesha v'hata'a v'nakeh, which means that Kadosh Baruch Hu also carries the sin. He actually has the patience, and he's bearing our averot with the same connotation of the word Nose avon. Further in the parasha, we talk about the Isha Sota. But wait a minute, what is the Isha Sota? The woman who is unfaithful to her husband. How do we call a couple in the Torah? Nesu'in. Ish Nasui, Isha Nesu'ah. Once again, the word Naso will be somehow involved in the topic of the Isha Sota. Later on, we have the famous Birkat Kohanim. Wait a minute. Birkat Kohanim is called in the halacha Hilchot Nesiat Kapayim, because the Kohanim have the obligation to lift up their palms, their hands, in order to bless Am Yisrael. Did you see that? Once again, we're going to talk about the word Naso. And finally, the ending of this week's parasha that talks about the Nesi'im. We're going to talk about the Hanukat HaMizbeach, where each Nasi from each tribe brought his korban to the inauguration for the Mishkan. And once again, we're going to have the word Naso. Nesi'im comes from the word Naso. So what is happening? What is exactly the pattern? With Hashem's help, I would like to share with you something that I believe is very, very interesting, because once again, Parashat Naso is the parasha that represents Am Yisrael as higher, as Nesi'im, as elevated. And there is a pattern for that. And I want to try to go back now to the beginning of the parasha. We said that Naso means to count, and Naso means to carry. These two ideas are actually very important for every Jewish person in order to feel himself elevated, which means that there are two details that seem to be two opposite, but they form one entity. And that is the fact that each Jew needs to know that as much as he is part of the Kelal, of a Kehillah, of a big Kehillah, he still has to know that he has himself a Yehudiyut, some uniqueness that HaKadosh Baruch Hu finds in him, that he can change everything. The fact that you were born in this world, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave you life, it means that you as an individual can contribute, and you are not just another number. And that is the first concept of Naso, to count, to make everyone count. The second one is, at the same time, if you feel that you are so special and so unique, there is a danger to that. And the danger is that you feel that you are above everyone and you don't have to carry with everyone. And the Torah says, no. The same word Naso also means to carry. You are part of everyone. You have to carry the burden just like everyone else, because you are part of the Kelal. And we have to juggle between these two concepts to really have the shlemut and the perfection of being a Nasi, of being a true prince in Am Yisrael. And then we move further in three different topics in this week's parasha that talk about our relationship, the relationship that we have in this world as a Jew and as a Nasi. The first one is towards Borei Olam. The vidui is something that we have to confess between us and Hashem. There is no priest, there is no rabbi. The vidui is something very personal in my relationship from here down below to HaKadosh Baruch Hu up above. And that is the concept of the vidui. Make sure that you are a prince in that type of relationship. The second one, talking about the Isha Sota, is the relationship that we have, Ben Adam LaChavero. The most powerful relationship that a man or a woman can have is through marriage. No one knows you as much as your spouse. And that is where you have to be metaken the midot. Not in the business, not in the shul, at home, in your relationship at home. This is where the concept of Naso also exists. This is where you have to shine and be like a prince. And the next one, Nesiat Kapayim. The Birkat Kohanim. The Birkat Kohanim represents the idea that us as leaders, we also have a responsibility to those who are down below, to those, our children, our students, those who are looking up to us, who have to resemble to us. And that is a relationship that we need to have with those that are looking up, to be those role models, to be true princes. And that is the job of the Kohanim. And to each person, because he somehow is a role model for someone else. These 5 ideas will all come down together to form the afikoman of this week's parasha, the last one, Vehanesiim Heviu, which means that now is the time to shine. Now is the time to celebrate. And now is the time to proudly say, we can be called Ve'atem tihiu li mamlechet kohanim ve'goy kadosh. Only when a person is going to be working on all these ideas, and again, so amazing that they all connect to the word Naso, then he can truly deserve to be a Nasi Elohim Ata Betochenu, to be a true prince. And we all know that we live in times that Am Yisrael needs to shine. Am Yisrael needs to really stick out in the most positive way in the eyes of the world. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us to achieve this holy task, to truly deserve to be the Nasi Elohim, to be Mekadesh Shemo Barabim, to sanctify His name in public, and to truly deserve Mashiach Titkenu, the Binyan Bet HaMikdash, and the Geula Shelema. Amen. Kenehi Ratzon. Shabbat Shalom Uvarach.